Preparing. Let's see if this is working. All right, so we are now live on Facebook. So hello, hello. And what I'm also going to do is just get myself, pull Facebook up on here so that I can see who is also joining me live on Facebook. And then if you are joining me live on Facebook, I can answer your questions as well. I see that Cassie and Kelly are on Facebook so far. So hello, hello, and hello, Pamela and Carol and Susan and Giselle. And Chelsea's here too. So hello, hello, welcome. I am here in Costa Rica. We are talking about fasting for fat loss over the age of 40 specifically. So I'm going to be diving a little bit into hormones and what's happening there. I have with me right now, I'm fasting right now as we speak, and I've got some therapeutic ketones that I'm drinking. And I like to do that, especially when I'm doing presentations, because it kind of just like sort of amps me up and gets me ready and gets me in the zone. So, so once again, if you are just hopping on, you know, I like to do this. I like to make these nice and interactive. So if you're joining me live on Facebook, just put a live in the comment. If you are catching the replay, put a replay in the comment. Let me know where you are joining me from, and let me know sort of what is your experience with intermittent fasting. Have you, you're completely brand new to it. Maybe you've played around a little bit. Maybe you've been doing intermittent fasting for a while and it's not quite working the way that you were hoping. So just give me a sense of sort of where you're at. And I could see Carol said Infomere and have been doing intermittent for a few years, but probably not correctly. Chelsea 37, been doing intermittent fasting and extended fasting for years, but fell off the fasting train, and I'm now dealing with stress and perimenopause. Susan from Vancouver, have been doing IF for about 5 years. Awesome. So a little bit of a mix here, which is great. Cassie, looking to start fasting and looking at different possibilities. So awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my, I'm going to share my screen because I've got a little presentation for you ladies. So let's go from beginning. And there we go. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller here. So what I'm going to be doing is I've got this little presentation, but I will be checking the chat. So typically what I like to do is I like to kind of go through the whole presentation and save up the questions for the end so that I don't get like distracted or sort of like lose my flow. So again, you know, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you can start jotting questions down, and I will make some time at the end to answer them. Okay. So again, today we're talking about fasting for fat loss over 40, and specifically, we're going to dive into what I call hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. So this is a protocol that I designed for my clients, really to ensure that fasting is not having a negative impact on their hormones or on their metabolism. So we're going to dive into that, but we're also going to dive into like specifically what my protocol looks like, sort of what I pair intermittent fasting with, and it'll give you a really good idea of what I do with my clients. I will go right from the get-go, you know, just set up sort of like my philosophy when it comes to weight loss. I am not a quick fix weight loss coach. I am a slow and steady weight loss coach. My clients, they know that's part of the culture when they work with me. We have a private Facebook group called the Slow and Steady Club. So what I'm going to be teaching you here is about slow and steady fat loss. It is not about, you know, trying to get the quickest results possible. So I'm going to start by just, you know, setting that up for you. And whoops, let's see here. Oh, and I've got someone that I'm just going to mute so that I don't hear the noise in the background. And then why will this? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so let me just minimize that. Okay, so goals for the workshop. So we're probably going to be here for, I would say, like at least 45 minutes, and then depending on how many questions you have at the end. But really what I want to show you is why intermittent fasting specifically can be a really great tool for healthy weight loss when it's done correctly. And I also want to show you why women over 40, well, women in general, but specifically women over 40 need a more customized approach to intermittent fasting. So that's what I want to share with you today. Now, I don't know how many of you are new to the group, so I am going to quickly introduce myself. So if you are brand new, if this is your first workshop, hello, I am Haley. I am the moderator of the Perimenopause Body Solutions group. I am a nutrition coach and a lifestyle coach. I'm a board certified health and wellness coach. I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I have really, in the past, probably 7 years, dedicated my career to specifically helping women, and specifically women over the age of 35, moving through perimenopause, moving through menopause. And so that has led me to really do a lot of my continued education into specifically understanding just like the female metabolism, understanding hormones, understanding perimenopause, understanding menopause. And so everything that I've I've just been learning all about that for the past, again, at least, working with everyone in weight loss for over 10 years, but specifically with women for about 5 or 7 years now. But I do want to let you know that, it was not that long ago. Like when I was about 35, I literally knew nothing about hormones. I didn't even know perimenopause was a thing. I really didn't have a very good understanding of nutrition. And ultimately, when I was about 35, I was not at my healthiest. I was struggling with insomnia. I was struggling with infertility. I had IBS. I had hypoglycemia. So my blood sugar levels were all over the place. And ultimately, that's where my passion for nutrition began. It began because it was a healing journey for myself. And the more I learned about nutrition, the more I was like, oh my God, I just love it. I can't get enough of it. And then sort of started shifting towards helping other women with their own nutrition. My background was as a personal trainer, but I kind of moved away from personal training and into nutrition, especially in the past 5 to 7 years. I have worked with tons and tons of women. Like I said, I started off as a personal trainer, moved into nutrition, but I've worked with women in perimenopause. I've worked with women in postmenopause. I've worked with teenage girls. I've worked with women with hypothyroidism, with high blood pressure, with adrenal fatigue, with estrogen dominance, with PCOS, with various autoimmune conditions. I've worked with a ton of women. And through it all, I've learned a lot about weight loss. And I've worked with a lot of women that have had stubborn weight loss. And I'm here to tell you that one of the biggest myths in the dieting industry is that it's as simple as calories in, calories out. That simply isn't true. It's not to say that calories don't matter, but calories are just part of they're part of it. Weight loss is so much more than that. And that's really my philosophy. And that is now my passion, is really to teach women that, the calories in, calories out model for weight loss, if it's not working for you, it's because it doesn't work. We need more than that. And that's really my passion that I want to teach women about. So at the end of the presentation, or at the end of the masterclass, I will tell you a little bit more about my coaching and my the program that I have created for women. If this is of interest to you, you can stick around for that. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. So again, we're talking about fat loss for women over 40. Once again, if you are on Facebook, Please, put either a live or a replay on Facebook. Let me know where you are joining me from, and be interactive. One of the things that I want to do with these master classes, I really want to make them very interactive. So I am going to be giving away a prize. Okay, so in order to claim that prize, all you have to do is participate. Okay, so all you have to do is put in comments. And at the end, what I'm basically going to do is, once we're done, I'll put all names in a hat, and I'm going to pick it. And someone is going to get all of my recipes, all of my low carb recipes that I've created. I will give to one of the participants here, and all you have to do is participate. Okay. All right. So today we're going to cover, so why intermittent fasting, or why fasting specifically? How can it help with fat loss? We're going to talk about sort of like why you might experience drawbacks from intermittent fasting as a woman over 40 if you are not doing it correctly. We're going to talk about like what is the best way to incorporate intermittent fasting into your lifestyle. We're going to talk about my exact protocol that I use with my clients, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit. I'm going to share one of my clients who we leaned into intermittent fasting when she was not getting results. I'm going to show you sort of like what happened there, and tell you a little bit about what I did with her. Okay. All right. So what is intermittent fasting? So I think, it's really not that complicated, right? So intermittent is a fancy word for sometimes, and fasting is a fancy word for not eating. And ultimately, intermittent fasting just means that you choose periods of time where you stop eating, right? So we have an eating window, and then we have a fasting window. It's really not more complicated than that. Hello. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to ask you to mute yourself, or I'll just do it for you so that I don't hear that in the background. All right. So really, that's all it is. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Now, why it's going to help with fat loss. So, whoops. So, intermittent fasting and fat loss. I want to talk about the fasted state. So, ultimately, our metabolisms can be in two different states. So they can live in the fed state, or they can be in the fasted state. And depending on what state you're in, your metabolism is doing very, very, very different things. Okay. The fed state is pretty obvious. It's when we're eating food, right? Whereas the fasted state, that's a slightly different metabolic state. And it starts around 8 to 12 hours after we have finished eating. And it's really defined by sort of like that shift in our metabolism from getting our energy from external sources, so from the foods that we're eating, to using internal sources, to relying on stored fuel in the body. And what happens is that, now in our modern society, like if you think of our like cave women ancestors, they spent a lot of time in the fasted state, and they spent a little bit of time in the fed state, right? Because that was the nature of life back then. Whereas now, we've kind of flip-flopped in modern society. We now spend more time in the fed state than we spend in the fasted state. And this is having a detrimental effect on our metabolism, on our hormones, on our weight. Like, it's just not great. We've completely flip-flopped. And so one of the beautiful things about intermittent fasting is that it helps to start to balance out sort of like time spent in the fed state and time spent in the fasted state. And when we're in that fasted state, there are, like I said, it's like a metabolic shift, right? Your metabolism is just doing something completely different when it's in the fasted state. And I mean, there's like a whole list of different things that happen, and I'm not going to go through them all because we're speaking specific to fat loss today. I just want you to understand that when you're in the fed state, for example, blood glucose levels are elevated. When you're in the fasted state, blood glucose levels drop. So blood glucose is sugar in the blood, okay? When you're in the fed state, insulin goes up as well as IGF-1 goes up. When you're in the fasted state, those two things go down. When you are in the fed state, lipolysis comes to a stop. So lipolysis is the release of fatty acids or fat from your fat cells into the bloodstream. So when you're in the fed state, that goes down. When you're in the fasted state, that goes up. And then finally, ketone production. So ketones are a source, a type of fuel that the body can use. When we are in the fed state, that goes down. We're in the fasted state, that goes up. So they really are like yin and yang. They're very, very different. And essentially what happens is that when we move from the fed state to the fasted state, we are having this big shift from burning sugar or carbohydrates to burning fat as a fuel source, okay? So this is a kind of a cool diagram here that kind of just shows you sort of what is happening here. So like I said, right? So let's say at 0, right, you have your meal, okay? So within the first 0 to 6 hours after you have eaten, your body is basically just digesting and absorbing that food, okay? 6 to 8 hours, we're still in what we call the post-absorptive state, right? So the body is taking all of that food, it's converting it into energy, and that's what your body is relying on. Somewhere between 8 to 12 hours, okay? This is when the body kind of shifts into that fasted state. Now, it doesn't happen, it's not like a light switch, right? It's more like a dial, right? So the body kind of like enters into that fasted state. And when it moves into that fasted state, like I said, that is when it's no longer utilizing outside sources of energy. It's starting to rely on inner sources of energy. So this can be glycogen, which is, basically sugar or carbs. You can call them carbs that are located maybe in your muscle or maybe in your liver. It starts to use like different forms of fat, like glycerol or free fatty acids, triglycerides, that kind of thing. But it starts to utilize that as energy because there's nothing coming in. Now, just stop for a second, right? And just think logically here. Like if you are, and modern society, right? Like about 10 years ago, popular advice was to eat every 3 to 4 hours to stoke your metabolic fire. But think about that. If you are eating every 3 to 4 hours, you're never in that fasted state. You're constantly giving your body like this energy from outside sources. So how is your body going to access that stored energy that you're trying to get rid of, right? And then also another thing to kind of think about or consider is what does your life look like at the moment? So for a lot of women out there, maybe they wake up, maybe they have breakfast at 7, maybe they have a little snack at 10, maybe they have lunch at 1, maybe they have a little snack on the way home at 4, they have lunch or dinner around 6:30 or 7, then they go to bed, or right before bed, maybe they have a snack. And so we're spending all of this time in that fed state. And if it takes 8 to 12 hours to get into the fasted state, you can see how that might be detrimental, right? Now, here's a little hack we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So this is a really important one, is that, like I said, it takes like 12 to 48 hours is when the body starts to shift into utilizing stored energy. Now, what it's going to utilize first is stored glycogen or stored carbohydrates before it starts utilizing fat, because the body prefers carbohydrates. It's a much more efficient fuel source. It's kind of like fast food, right? It's simple, it's quick, it's efficient. So your body is always going to choose stored glycogen in your body before it starts utilizing fat, or it's definitely going to prioritize it, which is why you can see on this diagram how it says that it's only in 48 to 72 hours is when the body starts to use fat for fuel exclusively. Okay, now there's a hack here, which is low carb nutrition, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. But if you're using a low carb approach and you're pairing it with intermittent fasting, it's kind of like a shortcut because there is no stored glycogen. So your body jumps into that usage of fat a lot faster. Okay. So this is another cool diagram that really sort of shows that shift, right? So it shows sort of like what your body is utilizing as a fuel source when you are in the fed state and when you're in the fasted state. So over on the left side of that diagram, that's sort of like what the fed state is. So in the fed state, as you can see, the body uses carbohydrate oxidation, which is a fancy way of saying it's using carbs for fuel, okay? It's using a little bit of fat, but it is not using a lot of fat. As you are fasting, that's when you see this big shift, right? You see this big shift over here where now instead of carbohydrate oxidation, the body is using fat oxidation. This is where it starts to really dial in and use fat as a fuel source. And this is one of the reasons that intermittent fasting, again, especially when compared with low carb nutrition, can really be helpful for fat loss specifically, because you're setting your metabolism up for fat loss. And it's a much more effective means of getting the body to use fat for fuel versus just cutting your calories. Okay. Now, the other reason that I really like intermittent fasting as a strategy for fat loss is because it just makes caloric restriction easier. Because yes, you do have to be in a little bit of a deficit some of the time in order to lose weight. You need to be in a negative energy balance. And intermittent fasting just makes it that much easier because you have a shortened window. The shorter your eating window, the less opportunity to eat. It just becomes much easier to manage or control your caloric intake, okay? All right, so I do want to quickly talk about some of the other potential benefits of intermittent fasting here, because yes, you know, this is about fat loss, but I also want women to understand that, in my personal opinion, incorporating intermittent fasting into your lifestyle as a woman over 40 makes sense because it has so many other benefits, including like a reduction of autoimmunity, blood pressure, cancer risk, inflammation, oxidative stress, improving your blood lipid profile. So like your triglycerides, your LDL, your HDL, your brain health, anti-aging. It's such a great tool, and it's so easy to incorporate. And a lot of these things that you see on the screen right here, if you're just starting you're in your early 40s, understand that as your sex hormones are changing through perimenopause and into that menopause transition, when your sex hormones change, you are at more risk of all of this, okay? Because our sex hormones, they play a much bigger role in our body. It's not just about having a menstrual cycle. Those hormones play an important role in protecting us against these things. And so if we can, again, like for me, the way that I think about it, it's kind of like, well, these changes are happening. So let's become more strategic about our nutrition, about our lifestyle, taking these changes into account. Okay, so intermittent fasting, super awesome, but it depends on the whole approach being intermittent, okay? In other words, like if you fast too often or for too long, you can literally reverse some of the potential benefits of intermittent fasting. And this is especially true if you're a woman, but it is also especially true if you are a woman going through perimenopause. And I want you guys to think of intermittent fasting, two sort of like analogies that you can think of. One is like the bell curve, and one is the Goldilocks principle. So they're both the same. So if you think of the bell curve, right, you know what that bell curve is. It's kind of like not enough. So being in that fed state all the time is going to be a stressor on your metabolism. Fasting too much being in the fasted state too much is going to be a stressor on the metabolism. We need to find our sweet spot, which is the top of the bell curve. Also kind of like Goldilocks, not too little, not too much, but just right. Just like she liked her porridge and her beds and her chairs and everything, okay? That is the key when it comes to intermittent fasting, is you need to find that sweet spot. And the reason being is that intermittent fasting, when done too much, right? When we're sort of past that sweet spot, and even before that sweet spot, it can really have a negative impact on our hormones and on our metabolism. And that's why I want to teach you about what I call hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, because I essentially designed it to keep women in this sweet spot. so that they can incorporate intermittent fasting without having that negative effect on their hormones and on their metabolism. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about why women are more sensitive to intermittent fasting than men, because unfortunately that is the case. And, I've done a lot of research into this area. The proof is in the pudding. It's in the research. Unfortunately, even though this seems like sort of frustrating, men and women respond differently. And simply to break it down, like super simply, what happens is that women are much more sensitive than men are to being in a negative energy balance. And oftentimes when we are practicing intermittent fasting, most women come into it because they are trying to lose weight, and they come into it with sort of like this idea that, okay, well, intermittent fasting is going to help me cut my calories. And if some intermittent fasting is good, then more intermittent fasting must be better. And what happens is we put ourselves in this caloric deficit that is overly stressful on our female metabolism, and our metabolism reacts and it adapts to that. And this is what we're talking about here, is that we're incredibly sensitive to overall energy balance, calories in versus calories out, because let's face it, we are the sex that has the babies, and that is what our metabolism is designed to do. Whether we want to have babies or not, that is what our metabolism is designed to do. So I'm not going to go like into too much specifics here. We're going to jump into the protocols very, very soon. But I do want you to kind of understand sort of like how intermittent fasting can impact it. And it's not just intermittent fasting, it's also caloric restriction. So both of those things, right? I want you to think of your metabolism as a stress barometer. Okay. Your metabolism is sort of constantly assessing the situation, and your metabolism is like basically like all of the different metabolic processes that are going on in your body. They're adaptive. It's constantly changing. Your metabolism is constantly changing, and it's assessing, right? It's assessing the situation. It's assessing like, how hot is it outside? It's assessing how many calories are coming in. It's assessing, what's going on in your brain. Like it's constantly assessing. And so what research has shown for women is that when we are in a caloric deficit, which often happens with intermittent fasting, because we're in that fasted state. So, for the body, that is a caloric deficit, obviously, but also some women will tend to have quite less food during a fast, right? So what is happening here? So two of the sort of hormones that are going to get affected here are our hunger hormones. So leptin is your satiety hormone, ghrelin is your hunger hormone. So ghrelin, the hunger hormone, goes up when you're fasting, which is pretty obvious, especially when you're just getting into it. But the more important one is leptin. So leptin is your satiety hormone, but it happens to have a really big impact on your metabolism. Okay, so how many calories you're burning in a day. And what can happen, and this happens when women go on diets as well, like if you drop your caloric intake, leptin goes down, your satiety hormone goes down. But what you need to understand is that all of your hormones, it's like this big sort of highway of chemical messages, right? And they're all in communication with each other. So if you affect leptin, you're going to affect all kinds of stuff. What specifically happens in women, what the research has shown, is that, again, we're more sensitive to caloric restriction, and we're more sensitive to when the body isn't getting like energy coming in from outside sources. So what that does when leptin drops down because of that is it triggers kisspeptin, another hormone, to go up. And that happens in our brain, and it goes to the pituitary, and it says, hey, pituitary, this is not a great time to have babies because there's not very many calories coming in. So can you like tone it? Like we're going to tone down all of our, reproductive hormones. So follicle stimulating hormone goes down, luteinizing hormone goes down, estrogen goes down, progesterone goes down, testosterone goes down. All of these things go down. Again, you might be like, well, who cares, Haley? I have no interest in having a baby. But I am telling you that these hormones are really, really important, not just to your menstrual health and your menstrual cycle, but to how you look and how you feel, and to your overall health. So we want to hang on to those hormones as much as possible. And this is why in perimenopause specifically, a lot of experts, myself included, will say you got to tone it on the fasting, because you do not want to be affecting these sex hormones right now. They're already tanking. Don't tank them even further. Be smart about it, okay? Now, the other two hormones to keep in mind, one is your stress hormones, so adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol. Fasting is a stressor, right? That's obvious. You're not eating, you're restricting food, you're pushing your body into the fasted state, right? Your body's like, oh my God, it creates this big metabolic shift. Now, stress can be positive until there's too much, right? And so this is another one to consider, is that you know, when we're adding fasting, we have to consider, like, what are the other stressors in our life? If you're working out too much, which is why I don't like the eat less, move more model, right? Like if you're doing fasting and on top of that, you're trying to run for an hour every single day, for example, that could be too much, right? Because it's all about balance. It's still that Goldilocks principle. And the same is true with cortisol. So cortisol, and all of them really, it's actually a fat burning hormone. It often gets misrepresented as a fat storing hormone, but it's actually a fat burning hormone when it's in the right amounts. But if you have too little cortisol or you have too much cortisol, then that's going to be a problem. And so understanding that that fasting is going to elevate cortisol. So again, just understand that, right? So we want to be sort of, again, the Goldilocks principle. And then the other one that can potentially get affected is our thyroid. So thyroid is sort of like our master regulator of our metabolism. So it has a big impact on how many calories we burn in a day. It's not the only thing that impacts how many calories we burn in a day, but it is one thing. And the thyroid is also very susceptible or very sensitive to being in a caloric deficit. And so if your metabolism senses that there is a caloric deficit, one of the things it's going to try and do is it's going to try and conserve energy, because your body doesn't like being in a caloric deficit. It is not where the body likes to be. And what it can do is it can slow down the metabolism by slowing down the thyroid. So just understanding that when we're practicing intermittent fasting, there are real consequences to our hormones and to our metabolism. It doesn't mean we can't fast. It just means we have to be smart about it. We have to be strategic. And we really need to understand what is happening to our body. And that's why I like to educate women about these things. So hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. So what is it? So again, it is a protocol that I designed specifically so that women can incorporate intermittent fasting without having a negative impact on their hormones or on their metabolism. And just like I said, right, it's all about balance. It's about figuring out, like, well, how long should you fast? How often should you fast, so that you can get the benefits of it while staying in that sweet spot, right? I want to keep you in that sweet spot. So as a general rule of thumb, the longer you fast, right? So the longer the fasting window, the more intermittent it should be. Okay. So there's different ways that you can practice intermittent fasting. There's no rules here. You could do 12 hours of eating, 12 hours of fasting. You could do 14, 10, 16, 8, 18, 6, 24, 36. There's no like rules. This is the only rule. The longer you fast, the less often you should do it. So inside my program, I like to start women off with shorter fasts. I do believe that fasting is a muscle that we can build the same as we would build our biceps in the gym. Fasting is a muscle. So we start with a smaller fast to put less stress on the metabolism, right? Because I don't want to stress out the metabolism. So I start with a shorter fast. And as the metabolism gets used to it and my clients get used to it, we slowly increase the length of the fast. So we start off with 12-12 and we move into 14-10. Both of those are perfectly safe as a daily practice. Everyone, I won't say everyone, I can never say everyone, but I would say the majority of women would 100% benefit from a 12-12 or a 14-10. And again, it makes sense here, right? If 12-12 for me is a great weight management tool, then you're splitting your time in the fed state and the fasted state equally, which is what we want to be doing. 14-10 gives you a little edge. You spend a little extra time in the fasted state over the fed state, right? When you start increasing beyond that, this is when it's really easy to slip into chronic caloric restriction if you are doing it on a daily basis, which is why it needs to become intermittent. Because if you're chronically restricting your calories, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more, but if you're doing like a caloric deficit each and every single day, this is when you're going to impact your hormones. This is when your body is going to be like, okay, guys, this is a permanent situation. We need to start adapting to this. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to hack your body. You want to like outsmart your body and outsmart your metabolism. So just remember that. I'm putting it on its own little slide here. The longer you fast, and therefore the less you eat, the less often you should fast. Like if you just remember that from this entire presentation, that's awesome. Okay. So what I like to do when I'm thinking of hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, really it's about creating a fasting schedule to ensure that you have bigger calorie days so that you take stress off the metabolism, right? Because we don't want to be in that chronic caloric deficit. That is sending the wrong message to our hormones, the wrong message to our metabolism. So this is just like it to give you a sense, right? So if you're doing like a 16-8 fast, so 16 hours in the fasted state, 8 hours in the fed state, I would do that to a maximum of 5 days per week. That means on the other 2 days, you want to bump up your caloric intake, right? You want to be eating at maintenance, for example. And that, again, it's sending the message to your metabolism and to your hormones. Don't worry, all is well. There's food available. Okay. If you're going to do an 18-6, so 18 hours of fasting in a 6-hour window, I would do it up to a maximum of 4. 24, maximum of 3. OMAD, which refers to 1 meal a day, I would say maximum 2. Okay. That means on the other 5 days, you're increasing your caloric intake. At the end of the week, you're still going to be in a deficit. You're still going to be in a caloric deficit because you're creating that big deficit on those days, but you're not doing it chronically. So you're not sending the wrong message to your metabolism. Okay. It's like a hack. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about signs that you're fasting too much. And then we're going to dive into my exact protocol and sort of like what I pair this up with. But again, for every single woman, it's going to be different. And, those are sort of like some general rules that you can sort of go by, or some like a general fasting schedule, but it's going to be different for every single woman. And here it's going to, once again, it's going to be based on other stressors in your life, right? Because again, when it comes to stress, I want you to think that we all have what's called your allostatic load, which is how much stress you can handle before you break the camel's back, right? The straw that broke the camel's back. So you kind of have to like think of fasting as just one stressor in your life. Workouts are a stressor. Being in a caloric deficit is a stressor. Low carb can be a stressor. Obviously deadlines and financial debt, and your teenager, or the fight that you had with your husband, or the negative thoughts that go through your head when you jump on the scale in the morning and you get angry because the number isn't where you want it to be. These are all stressors and they all add up. And so fasting, again, the goal is to keep in that sweet spot. And so we want to make sure that we're not going over. If we're not in our sweet spot, if we're like putting too much stress on the metabolism, our body is going to tell us that we're going to start to see signs. And so these are some of the things that I kind of look for. So is your HEC in check? So HEC in check refers to hunger energy cravings, right? So hunger, so this is an important one, because oftentimes when women practice intermittent fasting, they stop feeling hunger, right? They're like, I could just do intermittent fasting all the time. Like, I'm never hungry. That's not great. Hunger is a normal signal. You need to feel hunger. Okay. But you also need to make sure that your hunger is in control. So if you fast, maybe you're like, I'm going to push the fast longer because it's going to be better and I'm going to spend more time in the fasted state. But when you open up that window, you're like, get out of my way. And you're like eating like everything that's in sight. Then you're not in control of your hunger. You need to be in control of your hunger. You need to be in control of your cravings, right? If your hunger feels out of control, your cravings feel out of control, that is a sign that your body is literally working against you. It's fighting back. It's like, woman, stop it. Okay. Energy is another really big one, right? If you start to see your energy tanking because you're practicing intermittent fasting, that is your body literally trying to slow you down. This is called metabolic compensation, metabolic adaptation. You can also call it adaptive thermogenesis, but your metabolism, your hormones, your metabolism is literally doing stuff to will you to eat, okay? And to will you to stop moving as much because it's trying to conserve energy. If your sleep quality deteriorates, that's a really big sign because sleep is often going to be disrupted by excessive cortisol levels. And so if we're pushing our cortisol too much by adding too much fasting, it can have an impact on our sleep. If you're cold all the time, right? If you're cold all the time, for me, that's a big sign that the thyroid is very unhappy. One of my girlfriends, I remember she got into intermittent fasting and she was doing 16/8 every single day, which is a big no-no. And I'm going to be giving you my schedule soon, but she was doing it every single day. And she's like, I'm cold all the time. I'm cold all the time. And I'm like, that's your thyroid. It is not happy. You can't do that. 16/8 daily is not great for women, especially women over 40. Okay. If you're getting moody or you're getting depressed, that could be a sign that your sex hormones are tanking, right? You don't want that. If your hair is falling out, or you hit a weight loss plateau, or you're constipated, or you're tired all the time, these are, again, they're all signs that your metabolism is adapting, is down regulating because it's trying to protect you. That is a sign that you need to back off the fasting a little bit, okay? All right, would you like to see my exact protocol? So this is your opportunity to participate a little bit here. Give me a 1 in the chat or on Facebook if you would like to dive into my exact fasting protocol, okay? And I'm just looking at some of the comments here at the same time. All right. Signs of fasting too much, but you don't fast enough. I'll get back to you, okay, Cassie? I'm going to come to you. Okay, let's keep going here, and then we'll come back to some questions. Okay, all right. So my fasting for fat loss over 40 protocol. So there's 4 parts to it. So the first one is hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, which we've been talking about, which is fasting on a schedule, right? And incorporating higher calorie days. The second one is clean and green low carb nutrition. The third one is intermittent energy restriction, which we're going to talk about, and then the Goldilocks workouts. So let's go through them one by one. So hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, we just talked about this one. So just remember, it's fasting on a well-designed schedule versus daily. Okay. And I think this is a mistake women make, is that when they think about 16/8, they're just like, well, this is a daily practice. It's not a daily practice. Okay. The whole goal here is to avoid any kind of metabolic stress that is going to force your body to adapt. And those adaptations are going to include hormonal imbalances that you will not enjoy them. Okay. So let's talk about the second one. So this is clean and green low carb nutrition. So as I was saying at the very beginning, at the beginning, I was showing you sort of like that screen where I was showing you that when the body is in the fasted state, the way that our body is utilizing fuel changes. So instead of carbohydrate oxidation, we're seeing free fatty acid oxidation, which is just like, what is our body utilizing to turn that into fuel that the body can use, okay? So when we're in the fasted state, we see that shift towards more fat, less carbs. The same is true of low carb nutrition, okay? Ketogenic diets, they're often referred to as a fasting mimicking diet because it mimics what the body does in the fasted state. It shifts the body away from burning sugar for fuel to burning fat for fuel, okay? And that is why, in my opinion, the two together, they're like a power couple. They're like the best way that you can encourage your body to burn fat. And it's why I do that in my program. Now, I say it is nutrition. It is not a diet. I really want to emphasize this because I don't want you to, and this is something I do with my clients a lot, is stop thinking about low carb nutrition or intermittent fasting or whatever other plan you're on as like a diet or as punishment or as taking away from your body, and start to think of it as fueling your body, as supporting your body, supporting your hormones, because ultimately that's what we're doing here. Like a low carb nutrition is about fueling the body and addressing hormonal imbalances. So I don't like to think about it as a diet. The way that I do it with my clients is a really big focus on anti-inflammatory foods, because there are, I mean, a lot of the bigger inflammatory foods are eliminated when you go low carb anyways, because you're mainly eliminating sugar and refined carbs. But even like there are certain foods like dairy. I'm not a huge fan of dairy all the time because it can be very inflammatory. So that's why I call it clean and green. We do a moderate approach to protein. Some ketogenic diets go too low in protein. In my opinion, for women our age, we need to protect our muscle mass. I think of it as controlled carbohydrate, so not necessarily ketogenic. Keto is great. Sometimes my clients are in ketosis, sometimes they're not. We don't even use the term keto. We certainly don't worry about our ketones, but we control our carbohydrates. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower. We eat the right carbohydrates. We make sure that our diet is high in fiber, and we make sure that we're getting healthy fats, okay? So that's sort of like just a second strategy that I really like to pair with intermittent fasting. And I wanna show you, because like I said, it's kind of like, it's often like a fasting mimicking diet, right? So you still get to eat food, but you get to see that transition away from burning sugar to burning fat. I personally like to do this before I introduce intermittent fasting, because when I start to introduce fasting, I want the body to know how to utilize fat for fuel, because I don't want to stress out the metabolism. And when you take food away, when you're fasting, when you force the body into the fasted state for a longer period of time, it's stressful. So I first teach the body how to utilize fat, then I start adding in the fasting. Okay, so this just gives you a sense. This is one of my clients. Now, these are the results that she saw probably in about like 4 weeks, in the first 4 weeks. Now, not all women see as drastic results as this. This woman specifically came to me with a more standard Canadian diet. And she was doing a lot of snacking in the evening and eating junk food and had a very sedentary lifestyle. So just making that shift from, and we didn't put her on like a crazy caloric deficit. She was eating about 1,800 calories a day, but making that shift into lower carb nutrition. And we added in walking. That's all we did, is we added in walking. And you can see how it supercharges lipolysis, or the burning of fat, right? So we were able to get that big drop in weight just by shifting, not worrying about calories. She never counted calories. We just shifted where the food was coming from. And that is the power of low carb nutrition, okay? Okay, number 3, the third element that I like to use inside my fasting protocol is intermittent energy restriction. So I've been telling you throughout this entire sort of presentation so far that chronic caloric restriction is bad, which it is, okay? So chronic caloric restriction is the worst thing that you can do to lose weight, because you will see metabolic adaptations. You are going to see hunger go up. You're going to see cravings go up. You're going to see your energy tank. Your thyroid's probably going to downregulate. It is a fact of life. This happens. It doesn't matter whether you're vegan, paleo, Whole30. If you're doing chronic caloric restriction, your metabolism is going to adapt. You're going to see changes to your hormones. You're going to see everything slow down. Your weight loss will kind of slow until it plateaus, okay? We don't want to be doing chronic caloric restriction. What we want to do is intermittent energy restriction, because we still need the caloric deficit. We just don't want it to be constant. So intermittent energy restriction basically just means we have higher calorie days and we have lower calorie days, okay? There are different ways of doing this. With some of my clients, I do something called a Matador approach, where I cut their calories for 2 weeks. We bring it back up for 2 weeks. We cut it, we bring it up. We cut it, we bring it up. And it's so that I'm sending a signal to the body, to the metabolism, to the hormones to say, it's cool, there's plenty of food. you're fine. Keep losing weight. Okay. You can do it that way. What I do with most of my clients is I do it on a cyclical basis throughout the week, and I pair it with their fasting days because it just makes the whole process that much easier. I'm going to show you that exact schedule. The final thing that I think is really important when it comes to getting that fat loss is the Goldilocks workout plan. And this is another mistake that I see women do is, again, and I posted this today, is that eating less and moving more is probably the biggest mistake you could do, because what you're doing effectively when you eat less and move more is you're expanding the what's the word? You're expanding the oh my God, my brain is suddenly not working. Deficit is not the right word, but basically between calories in, calories out, you're like expanding that. And that is putting stress on the metabolism, right? And so what you're, and that is also going to drive cortisol up, right? So what we want to do is we want to, with our workout, we want to manage stress on the metabolism. We want to manage cortisol. We also need to do it though, like you need some exercise because we want to be able to build muscle and protect our lean muscle. But you really have to work, especially in your 40s, you've got to watch out with working out. I see women work out far too much in their 40s. We are already more prone to cortisol, and just packing on tons of cardio or Orange Theory or spin classes or CrossFit or Peloton workouts, it is not going to help you. Okay. So Goldilocks workouts is not too much, not too little, but just right. And what we do specifically with my clients is 3 workouts a week. They're 30 minutes each. That's all they do. And they do walking. That is it. Okay. So let me show you what this all looks like when we put it together. So this is like a sample weekly schedule. So this is exactly what my clients do. I promised you the exact protocol. This is the exact protocol. So on Mondays, we do a 12-12 fast. They do their workout. It is a moderate calorie day. On Tuesdays, they do a 16-8 fast, right? So they do a longer fast. They go for a walk. They do not work out, and they do a low calorie day. So I give them an intentional lower calorie goal, about 500 calories less than on their moderate calorie day. We repeat that on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Now on Saturday, we do a 16-8 fast, walking. It is a high calorie day. Okay, so this is the day that we are saying to the body, you are good. There is no problem here. My clients get to enjoy a flex meal. They can eat cake, they can drink wine, they can have a big bowl of pasta, whatever it may be. This is our intentional higher calorie day. And then on Sunday, we do a back-to-back 16 fast and we go into low calorie. Back-to-back is fine here because we just had a high calorie day. So they're still doing their 16-8 fast. They're still doing a shorter window, but they're backloading all their calories later in the day. It's a great way to get away with eating whatever you want and still losing weight. Okay. So that's kind of what it looks like. All right. So what about longer fasts? So like I said, the general rule of thumb, the longer you fast, the less often you should do it. And what I have found in my program is that the longer fasts tend to be too stressful on their metabolism. And oftentimes their weight loss will stall like within like a month of starting. And so I used to do longer fasts. And now I really limit it to 16 for, I would say, most of my clients. There are exceptions to the rules. And so I just I gauge how they're doing, right? Again, my philosophy, slow and steady. That is the weight loss culture that I teach my clients. I want them to lose about a pound a week. So, I mean, sure, I could get them to fast. I could get them to do like 4-24 fasts, and they'd probably lose a bunch of weight and they'd lose it a lot faster. But that is sending the wrong signal to their hormones and to their metabolism, and their metabolism will react, right? And I don't want that. Now, there are exceptions. Some women who have severe metabolic inflexibility. So metabolic inflexibility is when their body cannot tap into their fat stores. And there are different reasons that this can happen. Some of them, I may do longer fasts because it will actually relieve metabolic stress. So the longer fast, instead of becoming a stressor, it becomes a recovery tool. And this is a really, like, I mean, I could do a whole topic on this, but with everything, workouts, fasting, low carb, everything, it can be a stressor or it can be a recovery tool. And this is going to be totally dependent on what is happening in a woman's life. I'm going to show you another woman that I'm working with. So this is just another graph. So this is Glenda. So Glenda, she started my program because her doctor told her, you have type 2 diabetes, you got to get this under control. And she was like, I need this because I need to be here for my family and I need to get healthy. So if you see on her chart here, this is when we transitioned into low carb nutrition. Okay. So a little bit of success at the beginning, but then if you see this whole chunk here, right, suddenly nothing, nada. We were playing with her macros. We were playing with her calories. We were trying different things. We were eliminating dairy, nada. So somewhere around here, I was like, you know what, Glenda, can you go to the store and buy a blood glucose test for me and start monitoring your blood glucose levels? So off she goes, because I knew she was compliant. She was sending me photos of her meals. Consistency is always the first thing I check. But she was being consistent. She was off. She was doing her thing. Started monitoring her blood glucose levels. And sure enough, even though she was eating low carb, her blood glucose was way higher. And quick, without diving into details here, but if your blood glucose is up, your insulin is up. And if your insulin is up, you are not going to tap into your fat cells, because insulin literally tells the body to store energy, and it literally turns off lipolysis, which is what we're going for. Okay. So I was like, we need to get your blood glucose down. So I was like, Glenda, how do you feel about leaning into some longer fasts? For you, I think it's going to be beneficial. Glenda was like, all right, I'm ready. Let's do it. And this is when we started right here. Okay. And this was like sort of towards the end of May. And this is like, I think this was last week. So she dropped suddenly 20 pounds quite quickly by leaning into fasting. So let's look at her schedule. So what we did with Glenda is something called alternate day fasting. So on Monday, she didn't eat. But on Tuesday, she had 3 meals. There's still that calorie cycling going on. I'm still sending the body the message saying, hey, you're cool. Here's some food. You get 3 meals today. 36-hour fast, 3 meals. So we're still calorie cycling. We eliminated all workouts. Linda was not working out at all. We were just doing walks. And on 3 days a week, she skipped all food. Okay. Glenda needed this because we needed to get those blood sugar levels to drop enough that we could get her body to start utilizing stored fat. Because before we did this, she was tired all the time because her body was like, okay, well, you're not giving us carbs anymore, and all we're getting is protein and vegetables and healthy fats, and we're tired and we don't know what to do. But the moment we did this, we were able to help, like, force her body to be like, okay, guys, we got to figure something out. And it did. And it started tapping into her fat stores, her energy stored. She started losing the weight. And we're still losing weight today. She's doing fantastic with it. For Glenda, this was a healing tool. It was a recovery tool. For most women, this would be a stressor. Okay. So again, I'm showing you this because I want you to understand that when it comes to fasting, it's going to be unique. There is no one protocol that's going to work for every single woman. You've got my basic protocol. Some women need to do a little less than that. Some women can do a little bit more. It's going to be really unique, but hopefully it's given you a little bit of a sense of how you can start to utilize fasting. But as you can see, even with Glenda, I'm not doing OMAD 5 days a week or 6 days a week. We're keeping it limited. We're cycling our calories. We're making sure that we're sending the right message to her metabolism at the same time. Okay. All right. I think that was the last one. So for those of you out there that are trying to lose weight, I'm going to quickly share a little bit about my program. If you're interested in learning more, I'll tell you a little bit more about it and how you can reach out if you'd like to learn more. And then I will open it up for some questions. Okay. So again, when it comes to weight loss over 40, it certainly is not impossible, but we do have to be a little bit smarter about it. And I want you to understand sort of what's going on here. So our hormones are changing, right? So some of the hormones that are fat burning hormones start to go down, right? So testosterone starts to go down, human growth hormone goes down, progesterone starts to decline as well. And these are all fat burning hormones. So when they go down, it makes weight loss a little bit harder. At the same time, we're seeing an increase in insulin resistance, cortisol levels are going up, estrogen actually goes up in perimenopause before it goes down, all of which make weight loss harder, okay? And then we have these other things that are happening in perimenopause, so we're a little bit more prone to hypothyroidism, we're more prone to inflammation, we're more prone to autoimmune conditions. So it's kind of like there's a little bit of a perfect storm going on. And this is why I really feel that this is a period in our life where we need to educate ourselves about how nutrition and lifestyle impact our hormones, because you can work with this. It's not like a, I hate when I read like in perimenopause or menopause, all women gain 10 pounds. This is not so. You can have control over it, but you have to understand how your body is working, and you have to understand how to be strategic about it so that you can control that, okay? So these are some of the clients that I've worked with. So this is Carmen. Carmen came to me with she was sort of like your typical sort of eat less, move more, really came to me not eating enough food, or not eating enough food during the day and then having zero control at night is probably more accurate. And so with Carmen, Carmen worked with me. Well, we're still in communication, but she has now lost over 45 pounds by comparing low carb nutrition with intermittent fasting and the calorie cycling and the workouts, but not excessive. She's up to 45 pounds of weight loss, lost and kept off, which is key. And that's one of my big things, is that's part of why you need to go slow and steady, is because if you go slow and steady, you're not screwing up your metabolism. You'll be able to keep it off. And now she's eating probably twice as much as she used to as well. This is another woman who came to me, who also was diagnosed with prediabetes and went on to lose 30 pounds in 14 weeks of working with me. Alice is another woman. So she came to me with, she came to me with both hypothyroidism, adrenal fatigue, like very inflamed. I remember like Alice's face was puffy, and I remember when she was comparing her before and after photos, like her face was completely different. It just goes to show you, like for her, it was really important to manage her stress, get her on some anti-inflammatory foods, and really like that was, and for Alice, we actually did a lot of work on her mindset as well. And this woman here, this is like, for those of you out there who like could get away with anything in your 30s, right? Like you could do a couple of workouts and it's like, oh, I've gained a little weight. I'll just go up my cardio a little bit and pretty much eat whatever I want. Well, in your 40s, what happens is, again, because your hormones are changing, what a lot of women notice is that suddenly what they used to do doesn't work anymore. And suddenly they're like, oh my God, well, how do I eat? Like, what do I do? This is the woman where I'm like, please don't start dieting. Please don't start dieting. Just learn how to eat for your hormones, because you don't want to get on that yo-yo dieting train. And so if you are that woman, please don't start dieting. Just learn how to eat for your hormones. I promise you, I eat plenty of food. I'm 47. I eat a lot of food. I'm still eating close to 2,000 calories a day. My metabolism has not slowed down. You don't need to go on a 1,200 calorie diet, okay? All right, so when you learn to eat for your hormones, right? When you learn how to get the right amount of protein, eat the right carbs, do all of that stuff, you can take control of hormonal weight gain. Again, yes, there's a lot of things that are working against us in perimenopause and menopause, but if you work with your body, like you can control that. You can take back control over your body. You can reduce inflammation, right? Like a lot of women start to see that inflammation, and the bloat, right? Bloat is another thing that a lot of women start to experience in their 40s. You can gain control over all of that. You can protect your muscle mass. You can boost your metabolism. Like again, just because you're going through perimenopause and menopause, there's so much you can do to prevent your metabolism from slowing down. And one of those things, guess what? Don't go on crazy diets, right? Don't go on a 1,200 calorie diet. And then number 4 is just avoiding all of these negative consequences of going on diets, because it does impact your hormone. It does impact your metabolism. You can so quickly get caught in this rat wheel of on a diet, off diet, on a diet, off diet, gain the weight, lose the weight, gain the weight, lose the weight. Incredibly frustrating. And anyways, so that's sort of what I do. And what I do is I call it a hormones first approach to fat loss, because ultimately that is what it's about. It's about being more smart, more strategic, understanding the science of metabolism, the science of nutrition, and teaching you about way more than just calories in, calories out. So it is a 6-month program. It is a curriculum. Like, you're literally going to go to metabolism school. You're going to learn about your body. You're going to learn about your hormones. You're going to learn how to eat right. And that's what it's all about. And it's about learning how to address insulin and how to address cortisol and how to manage estrogen and human growth hormone and testosterone, and eat in a way that is going to be supportive of your body. There are 3 phases in my program. So the first phase is when we shift into low carb nutrition. Like I said, it's about teaching your body how to burn fat, right? That's what it's all about. We do that before we even attempt fasting. We do that for the first 6 weeks. It's a very anti-inflammatory approach. It's about learning how to have a smarter calorie diet, not a lower calorie diet. We don't even use like the intermittent energy restriction technique. That comes way later. First, we learn what kind of calories to eat and in what amounts. Then in the second phase, we introduce hormone sensitive fat loss. So this is, you see weight loss in the first phase just from creating that transition. But in the second phase, this is where we start introducing intermittent fasting, carb cycling, which I didn't even talk about today. But we start introducing these things to, again, it's about slow and steady weight loss. And it's about creating a lifestyle approach. This is not a diet. This is about me educating you on how to eat for the rest of your life so that you can continue to manage your weight and you can have a ton of energy and just like, and health. Like, obviously health is super important. And so many of my clients come to me because they're like, oh my God, like my blood pressure has never been this good, or my doctor just told me, keep doing what you're doing, whatever it may be. It's about way more than weight loss. Weight loss is kind of like a benefit of it, but most women, like they're looking for weight loss. They're not looking for health. I'd love it to be the other way around, but that is the fact of life. So, but you do get both. And then in the third phase, this is where the sample schedule that I just showed you, that is what we do in the second half. We kind of work up to it. And then we kind of learn how to really implement that schedule that I showed you. This is where we incorporate the calorie cycling, the longer fasts. This is also where I teach women about stress management and sleep, which are really, really important. Now, when it comes to this program, if this is something that you're interested in, I want you to understand this is not like here's a PDF, go off and start to implement it. This is personal coaching, which means I am literally walking you through this step by step. If you decide to join, we immediately book an initial assessment, an onboarding session, and then we speak to each other every 2 weeks. I know my clients, like I know when their kids are in the hospital, I know when their kids are graduating, like it is a relationship that we have together. And I become very vested in your success because you kind of become like my friend, like I know you, right? And so it is personal coaching. It is you and me, and I take you through that whole thing for 6 months. And I'll say here, it's about a lot more than just learning about nutrition, because for a lot of women, I just had this big group coaching session with all of my clients. And we were talking about like self-sabotage and mindset and limiting beliefs. And ultimately, when it comes to weight loss, it's about implementation as well, which is just as hard. Change is hard. I am a change coach. And so it's not so much about me saying like, these are the best sources of protein. It's about like, okay, you're struggling. You're not implementing what I've taught you. Let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. So it is about a change program. It's about changing your habits, changing your mindset. I'm very enthusiastic because obviously it's my program, but it's because I know women need so much more than just a 1,200 calorie diet. The other thing that incorporates is the muscles for menopause, right? So my Goldilocks workout plan, which again, the whole idea here is that you're going to learn how to work out just enough, but not too much. You're going to learn how to work out smarter, not harder. So it includes like a 24-week structured workout plan for you. It includes meal plans and over 150 recipes. So I've literally done all the work for you. Every single week as we go through the program, every single week you're learning the way that I like to think of the program or the curriculum. It's like a big book. Every week you're going to get a chapter. I'm going to teach you something about your metabolism or your hormones or your nutrition or your lifestyle. You're going to implement it for an entire week. Then I'm going to give you the next chapter. For every single chapter, you get a meal plan so that you know how to implement the stuff that I'm teaching you. Okay, so it's all broken down. You literally don't have to do anything. The Slow and Steady Club is also included. I kind of talked to you about that. Again, the Slow and Steady Club, this is like my diet culture. Okay, my diet culture is about imperfection. It's about learning to fail. It's about learning to be patient, about learning to persevere, about learning to get curious and get instead of frustrated, and about learning to really, again, just adopt a philosophy of being okay with slow progress. The diet industry has really done us a disfavor by encouraging us to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. None of that is helping. So really, really important here is that we need to have a complete shift in our mindset as to approaching weight loss. Okay, it needs to be slow and steady if you want to keep it off permanently, and it needs to be about a lifestyle change, not just a 30-day fix. Okay. All right, so how much? I know you're probably thinking, well, this all sounds great, but there's no way I can afford it. And I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. It's really not as much as you might think. A lot of personal coaches charge probably close to $2,500 for a program like this. I charge $400 a month, which is pretty much what you would pay to see a personal trainer for 1 hour a week. So you could see a personal trainer for 1 hour a week, or you can get all of this. And I'm going to even sweeten the pot because I know that it's summer. I know this is a time of year where it's a little bit harder to commit to something. So I am giving 25% off for the month of July. I did this in June. I'm doing it again now. That means that you can get it for $300 instead of $400. So you get the curriculum, you get all the unlimited one-on-one support, you get the workouts, the meal plans, the recipes, the Slow and Steady Club. You also get an app. All of this is delivered on an app where I am literally tracking everything that you do. I can see when you're walking. I can see how many calories you've burned. I can see everything. So everything is included. It's $300 a month instead of $400 for 6 months. If you're like, okay, I want to do this, but my vacation starts next week, lock in, like commit to the program, lock in your price at $300 a month. You can start later. You can start in August or even September if you want to, but if you commit to it now, I will lock in that price at $300, okay? Now, if this is all, if you're wanting to learn more, if you're like, okay, this sounds like something that I need, all I want you to do is book a strategy call with me. So a strategy call basically just means that we get on a phone and we get to know each other. You're going to tell me about your health history, about your hormones, about how many diets you've tried, about what you've done and what you haven't done and what you're currently doing. We'll kind of talk about it. We can go through the program together. You can answer questions. We can go over concerns. If then you decide like, yes, this is something I want to commit to, then we'll get you started for $300 a month. We'll lock in that price, okay? And if you want to do that, you're just going to go to my website. So it's projectmenopause.ca/work-with-me. And you'll see that on there, you can apply for a strategy session, book a time with me, and we can chat, okay? So there you have it, ladies. That's my little spiel. And we can dive into some questions. So I'm going to go back over to my chat here inside Zoom, my Zoom room with my ladies, and I'm going to go through some of the questions here that have come up. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so Carol, I'm 63 almost, so postmenopausal. Do these protocols still work with my hormones? Yes, they do, Carol, because essentially, like when women are going through perimenopause, they're going through the change. You've just gone through the change, but your estrogen's still low, your progesterone is still low, your insulin is probably up, your testosterone is down, your human growth hormone is down. You're struggling with sarcopenia, which is like that age-related muscle mass loss. So it's just that you're like the transition is done. And now your hormones are kind of like in a specific spot. The only thing that you may or may not be struggling with is estrogen dominance. You can be postmenopausal and still have estrogen dominance, by the way. But yes, because ultimately, like, again, now your hormones have shifted. If you're still eating the way that you did when you were 35, you're eating the way that your hormones were in 30, like at 35, if that makes sense. Your hormones are different. You need to learn how to eat differently. You need to learn how to live a different lifestyle in accordance to what your current metabolic identity is. Does that make sense? And then another question was, will coffee with heavy cream break a fast? Okay, awesome, Carol. Will coffee with heavy cream break a fast? So I'm not a purist when it comes to fasting. And again, I think we need to think logically about this, right? So I'm fasting right now. I have cream with my coffee every morning. And I still practice fasting. It's not like it's going to turn off. Like if we think about it logically, right? If you remember the diagram at the beginning where I showed you how our body can utilize carbs or fat, but how there's like, it's a transition, right? So let's say you have a little bit of cream. Okay, maybe you give your body 25 calories. Is it really going to pull it out of the fasted state for more than 15 minutes? No, it's not. Like if the way that I think of it is like, if you have a cup of coffee and that makes it easy for you to fast for 16 hours and therefore stay in the fasted state longer and manage your calories on those days, have the cream in your coffee, right? That's my opinion. I know not everybody in the world would agree with that, but that's sort of like my opinion. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. I'm just going through. Can we have a copy of this presentation? Yes, I can attach a copy. I'm going to be sending out the recording of this. So if you registered, so anyone that's on Zoom, obviously I know that you guys registered. So you're going to get a copy of the recording. I will attach a copy of the presentation if that's helpful, and then you can go through that. So you can absolutely do that. I'll make sure to do that. And I was going to attach something else. I can't remember. I got totally distracted. This happens. Okay, let's see what else here. Does it help with kidney issues? Yes, I'm going to say yes, but I don't really know what kidney issues we're talking about here, but so just to give you like a little bit of a sense, so I don't know if you guys know Jason Fung, but he's a nephrologist. And so when people have type 2 diabetes, they oftentimes have like major issues with their kidneys. And nephrologist is a kidney specialist essentially. And Jason Fung, who again is a nephrologist based out of Toronto, well, he works specifically with mainly people with metabolic conditions such as type 2 diabetes. And guess what he uses? Low carb nutrition and intermittent fasting. So yes, I would say it would definitely help. Okay. Okay, so Janelle, I saw that you want the copy of the presentation. So again, just make sure that you've registered. I'll post the link, and then I'm going to send out the recording in a couple of days. So it'll give you a couple of days to get that to get registered, just to make sure that you get the replay. What if you have all the signs of fasting too much, but you don't fast? So is fasting still a good idea for me? Cassie, that's really hard to say because this is where, I can't, it's hard for me to coach you without knowing anything about you. Like I would need to take a deeper dive into exactly what is going on, I would probably want to, I'd say, okay, well, let's see some blood work, like, what's your insulin at? Have you had a Dutch test? Do you know where your cortisol is at? Maybe like go see your doctor, do these tests. When's the last time you got your thyroid tested? What are your thyroid results? So, if you're noticing all of those different signs that I talked about, my recommendation would be go talk to your doctor. You need to get some blood work done. You need to figure out like why you're feeling that way, because if you are feeling that way, potentially it's your thyroid, potentially it's your adrenals, potentially it's your sex hormones, but you need the data to start figuring that out. Fasting potentially would just push that even further. Women who I'm cautious, extreme, like you could probably still do like a 12-12 or a 14-10. Women who already have hypothyroidism, or women who have adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction, these are women that I feel probably would benefit from having a coach keep an eye on them and having like, blood work like done maybe every 2 months or so, because basically what you want to do is get the blood work and then start the practice, and then do some blood work 2 months later and see what is happening to your hormones, right? Because like you'll have that feedback by doing that blood work. Okay. How do you know how many calories you need in a day? Okay, well, that is, there's lots of different calculators online. I can post one that I use all the time that was designed by Precision Nutrition, but essentially when it comes to calories, you need to look at like your age, your sex, your current height, your current weight. You need to look at your activity level. And then from there, you'll be able to figure out like your total daily expenditure. Okay. But unfortunately, there's no simple calculation. And even with those calculations, it's always only going to be an estimate, because if you have, for instance, hypothyroidism, it could be less than what the calculator is saying. If you have a history of chronic dieting, it could be less than what the calculator is saying. So, I mean, at best, it's going to be, when it comes to like figuring out your calories, it's always a starting point. And then the best thing you can do is start playing around with your nutrition and use that information as feedback and make adjustments from there. Do you offer this program without workouts for those who already have a training program? Yes, for sure. I've got a couple of women in the program that are doing it. Some women don't do any workouts because they're just not ready for working out. And so we intentionally just limit it to walking. And some women who are doing the program, they have their own workouts already. I kind of look at what their workout schedule is, and I might make recommendations. So if a woman came to me doing 5 days worth of CrossFit, I would probably encourage her not to do that. But yes, there are certainly women inside the program that are doing their own thing. Okay. If I've done the program and fat loss is still stubborn while walking every day, meal prep, stress management, etc., would it be safe to do 2 36-hour fasts? I would say that what you would want to do is, again, I would go and get a blood, like go and test your insulin levels and see if that's what the problem is. Because again, it's going to depend, right? Because if the problem is insulin, then a longer fast might be beneficial. If the problem is cortisol and adrenal fatigue, the 2 36-hour fasts are just going to push that even further. So this is where like it's, it's a little bit hard to like say this is exactly what you should do, because it's going to depend on every single woman. And for some women, the 2 36-hour fasts are going to become a stressor. For some, they're going to be a recovery tool. So it's a little bit hard to answer that question. Any other questions for me about fasting, metabolism, hormones, anything that I can help you with? And you can, if you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself and just ask me as well. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, I think we are good. Hopefully that was really educational and you learned a bunch. If you have any questions that come up that you would like to ask me about, you can always just reach out to me on Facebook. Like if you messenger me, like that's not a problem. I'll tell you about the next one. So the next big workshop is going to be in July. Sorry, this is July, August. So what I'm going to do in August, just because it's a question that keeps coming up inside inside with my private clients as well, is I'm going to do a workshop on some of the top blood work tests that I recommend doing on a regular basis so that you can understand your metabolism and you can understand your hormones and you can make educated choices about your nutrition and your lifestyle based off of that information. So that is going to be the next workshop coming up in August. If you have a topic that you would like to learn more about, that you'd like me to do a workshop on, please reach out, send me a message, let me know what would be helpful, and I would be happy to do that. All right, everybody, have a wonderful end to your day. Thank you so much for joining me live. I'm going to go through all of those of you who participated. I'm going to pick one lucky lady and I'll announce it as a post on Perimenopause Body Solutions, and you will receive all of my recipes. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye.